back and better than ever, I would say, with this episode of the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It is brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. I am Kevin Crockett, happy to host this thing, as always, back with my friends Amie Allanson-Dundon and Jody McCloud Missmer. Ladies, how are we? How are things?
We're good, but Amie's got a lot of stuff going on here, and I'm a little intimidated.
No, we're really good. I just found a report that just came out from the government on the topic that we're discussing today. So I have it all for reference.
Okay, good. For the audio guys in the background, just get ready to edit the moving of papers. That's really the big edit in this.
I don't know. Well, she's got it pretty well.
I'm going to try not to touch it.
Okay. Ooh, that'll be a fun game. We'll set an over-under on when Amie's going to touch the papers.
Oh, nice.
Kind of spot in the podcast. Well, listen, ladies, first time we've been back as a trio in a little while, so this is very exciting. And as always, a serious topic as we get ready to lean into it here. Loneliness and connection. Certainly, there are times that all of us at any age could certainly feel lonely and feel disconnected from those around us. But I kind of just want to start with what we would consider the definition of loneliness, because it might not just be a person sitting by themselves. It's obviously got a lot to do with what someone is feeling as well. So, Amie, I'm going to go ahead and kickstart with you. If we were looking for a definition of loneliness when discussing loneliness and connection, what would that definition be?
So there are a ton, right, of definitions of loneliness, but I think what really sums it up for me is a lack of social connection, a lack of social connectedness, because what might be lonely for me might not be lonely for you, Crockett, or might not be lonely for Jody, and we all get needs met in very different ways. But really the lack of social connection, we know can have really significant effects on folks based on what's going on in their life at that moment.
Which makes sense, because people often say that they can feel alone in a crowded room because they lack the connection to those who are around them. And it really is about that connection beyond that physical space. Right,
because you can be lonely in a relationship. You can be lonely in your community. You can be lonely in society for so many different reasons. But really, it has a lot to do with kind of how you've structured your life, how you've structured your tribe, I think, so to speak. For some people, their connection is to many people in a society, and to others, it's one or two very close people. So, we unfortunately know that that loneliness is now an epidemic.
Well, and it's been warped by social media. Yeah. So connection in and of itself has been warped by virtual connection. And I think I'll be interested to hear what the study has, but I think we are continuing to learn that the impact of social media isn't necessarily, and we're not talking about social media, I'm talking about the connection that people feel through social media, may be warping that loneliness or feeling alone. And it is an epidemic. And we're seeing that a lot across the board. But it's funny, because when I was talking to my husband and he said, "Oh, what's the podcast going to be on?" And I said, I actually said, well, it's kind of social isolation, like loneliness. And he made the comment, he's like, "What are you going to talk about?" and I said, well, I guess that's the point, right? What are we going to talk about? But I started thinking about the word isolation in reference to feeling alone or lonely. And because we're in the hospital environment, isolation is very often a way that we protect people. So my question that I wanted to pose to Amie this morning was, for some people who find themselves lonely or alone, is there an element of protection that is occurring by isolating themselves? Is there potentially something that they are trying to protect themselves from or avoid? Is it in fact easier for some people when we talk about being alone or loneliness or isolation?
Well, I think we have to look at it a few ways. I think we have to look at the epidemic of anxiety and depression in our society. And we know that when folks have high anxiety or a high level of depression, oftentimes they think they're protecting themselves by isolating because it feels less hard if I just kind of stay by myself in my house and don't go out and don't socialize. It's easier because my anxiety is high or my depression is high. So I think I'm protecting myself. And I think some people do protect themselves from connection if they maybe have been in lots of relationships where they haven't been able to trust other people. So they think, well, it's like a generalization. If I couldn't trust this person or this person, I can't trust anybody. So I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to go use these resources that are out there for me. So I do think that people's mental health status does shape their social connection.
So you talked about structure. What do you mean by that? You said it's how they structure their social connection.
So you can, like you were just talking about social media, I can structure a social media presence that looks very different on the outside than it is in reality. I can look like I'm very connected and have lots of followers and be following lots of people, yet not really have a meaningful relationship with anyone. I can structure it that way because it's very safe. I can put myself out there, and then not really ever get to know anyone. I think social connection, at work has changed too, in terms of how we set up our work connection. I think there was a time in the United States when we were very connected at work and would connect in person, face to face, all the time in meetings. And since the pandemic, we don't connect. We connect through a virtual screen. That isn't really connection. It's as much as people want to say I'm connected all day, you're not connected all day. I can't touch you. I can't look in your eyes and feel the energy you're giving off. It's a very different connection. It's very limiting.
But I think though that we have slowly, and this is more a question, I guess, or an observation. I'll say it's an observation. I think as a society, we've been slowly moving in that direction because for a lot of people, it was an easier transition to work with people through some sort of media. So something's been happening that led us to be able to, I don't know, it seemed like we very quickly flipped the switch. And it seems like people are having, and I am generalizing, so I'm going to go on record and say I'm generalizing. But it seems like people are more resistant to reconnecting now because there are efficiencies to it. But I think we need to be careful about that at the same point in time, right?
No, I agree. I think, well, and again, these are opinions. That's why we're doing a podcast, right? We're just talking about
starting the conversation.
I think the COVID forced us into an overnight disconnection, and we didn't get to gradually figure out how to do it right.
So where I say we easily flipped the switch, you're saying no, we didn't.
I don't think we did.
You are wrong.
I'm saying.
Do you feel that?
Oh my God.
I'm just the referee over here in the striped shirt. I'm going to let you guys keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
I think from an operational, organizational standpoint, we flipped the switch easily. I think from a human, emotional standpoint, we did not do a good job.
I would agree with you because it didn't feel normal.
It still doesn't feel normal.
It still doesn't feel normal. Yeah.
Because I'm not as connected, right? When one of the things we know, so the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on the healing effects of social connection and community are Yeah.
Easy for her to say.
Easy for me to say. Our epidemic of loneliness and isolation, the report from the Surgeon General came out in 2023. Just came out.
Wow, we actually have a recent study.
We have a recent study, right? And they talk about the 6 pillars to advance social connection. And I don't think that we've paid attention to these pillars as we flip the switch. Mm-hmm. They talk about strengthening social infrastructure in local communities, enacting pro-connection public policies, mobilizing the health sector, reforming digital environments, deepening our knowledge, and developing and coordinating national research agendas, and building. Really?
Well, let's start with number 1. Okay, so I can read Amie's paper, and I'm not going to touch it. Strengthen social infrastructure in local communities. So when you define local infrastructure, I immediately think of church. I immediately think of Kiwanis, or maybe a veterans organization, or an American Legion, or the fire company, or the ambulance. Like I think of those things, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, all of those pieces. So I think that those have become, I just had a thought, but I know. That.
Well, let me here, because I'll jump in and I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate for both of you and say, perhaps, what if a person says, well, listen, I think I might still be lonely, but I engage more now in the world since the pandemic because I'll go on and be a gamer and talk to people and play a game, or I may be getting therapy, seeing an online therapist, which I never would have gone to the office before, and maybe that's a way that I'm trying to combat what I'm feeling. Listen, I understand, particularly when you take isolation, the word, it literally means be by yourself. So I understand that concept from a physical standpoint, but there are some people out there that might say this is the most social that they've ever been as a result of things that have come out on the other side of the pandemic. So maybe the next question to pivot, I think, is if we are a person looking at ourselves, or maybe we have someone in our own lives that we think may be starting to become a little bit isolated, the particular signs that maybe we're looking for. I think in ourselves, we're going to feel a certain kind of way, but certainly if I have somebody that, I'm close to or I am with that I feel like is getting distant, just maybe some of those particular signs that maybe you could be on the lookout for somebody that you think might be dealing with a lack of connection, isolation, things of that nature.
So I think we have to take that on an individual case-by-case basis, right? I mean, that's such a therapy answer for you, Crockett. It's like when a lawyer says, well, that depends. I kind of feel that way. So if you have somebody in your life who is changing, or who you notice changes in, whatever that is for that person, pay attention to that. If they are somebody that's normally very outgoing and they come to things and they're social, and all of a sudden they're not coming as much and they're canceling or they're just not showing up, that's a flag, right? That's a red flag. If it's, it could be their connection even in the household, right? Is it somebody who's just staying in their room more, or staying in the basement more, or, just kind of sleeping a lot? Whatever withdrawal looks like, maybe it's somebody who is in your household and who used to always eat dinner with you, and now they're just not really eating with everybody. This
is a very serious topic. Do these things and we know what they mean to us. And here's my example. Not at an epidemic level, but you get finished with work, it's 5:30, you're not really ready to be with other people. So
you're describing me.
Yeah, right. I'm describing me, actually, but sure, let's go with you.
Intervention very quickly. Go ahead.
No, but I think we know these signs and symptoms within ourselves. Now, this isn't to an epidemic level, but you leave work, it's 5:30, you're not quite ready to deal with other people. You might go to the grocery store and wander the grocery store because you need to maybe get something at the grocery store, and your grocery store trip ends up taking 2 hours instead of the 5 minutes it takes to rush in and go get something, right? So you're in the grocery store for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and you're kind of wandering around. You're just disconnected from all of those pieces. You get back in your car and you're like, I'm wondering if that restaurant's still open, but you're not going in. But you maybe take a drive and you check those pieces. And all of this is to delay having to interact with other you feel this, right? In your soul.
In my core.
I know. And so this was Friday for me. So then you get home, or that person. We get home. And then you find other things to do. And so for some people, I would say that is a self-care moment. Okay. That is you knowing you. But we know what we do for avoidance and to isolate and to stay alone. Pay attention to other people because you know it. You know the other people in your life. If that's every day that you leave work and now you're disconnecting with your family or disconnecting with people regularly and you're losing touch with that person, you need to call them out on it. You need to check in. My point in saying that, Crockett, is that where Amie says, well, it depends, it's individual, for you, and if you don't, you need to ask yourself how you avoid other people. When you're overwhelmed or when you need to disconnect, what do you do? And then multiply that by, 20. And when you start to see that in somebody else to that level, you need to intervene. You need to ask the question, are you okay? Hey, I've noticed every day after work, you're going somewhere and you're 2 hours late, or you're delaying things. Pay attention to that. So I don't know that it's as deep as that depression. It could be that person who's disconnecting slowly to control their environment.
Yeah, and in that case, that's very difficult to spot in a friend or a loved one.
Sure, because you respect who they are as an individual.
Yeah.
But if it happens to the point where now it's impacting your relationship with them, you need to call them out.
Yeah.
So let me ask, when you do call them out, you have that conversation, where do you go from there? Where does help begin? What when we try to call someone out on that, but okay, we've had that conversation. So Amie, I'll start with you. Where does it go from there?
So, I think that it's really important that we all start to get a whole lot more honest with each other. And if haven't been connecting with Jody, I'm going to say to her, I'm noticing something's wrong. Mm-hmm. You seem off. We need to talk.
I'm okay. I feel like she really meant that right there.
I felt that on this.
Did you
side.
feel that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean. I think we know each. I think it's very important in terms of where do I start. I start by being honest with the people I love and I care about, or that I work with, and say, can I ask you something? I've noticed X, Y, Z, or can we grab a cup of coffee? Or rather than saying, hey, we should have coffee sometime, say, what are you doing Wednesday after work?
That's the worst. When you actually know when you feel something in your core, even if this isn't someone you love, or this isn't like an affection towards someone, stop saying, hey, why don't we do this sometime?
Oh.
And do it.
Schedule it. Like let's
show up. Yeah. Just show up and say, hey, I have coffee. I don't drink coffee. Well, too bad. You're going to sit with a hot cup of something in front of you, and we're going to take 15 minutes. Like, there are moments in our lives where we need to take responsibility. That's maybe not the right word. We need to care about the other person across from us in a real and active way, instead of going, not my problem, not my business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know how many times last week I said, not my circus, not my monkeys?
I'm guessing a lot.
A lot last week. Yeah. Sorry, Crockett.
She got it tattooed on her arm. That's actually why she's wearing it. It's still healing.
People who know me know there is not a tattoo anywhere, but thanks.
Okay, fair enough. I thought you would have gotten a hot cup of something just right
A hot cup of something.
That's our next podcast, the hot cup of something podcast.
Yeah.
But I think that's a fair point to say we need to show up for each other more better.
Yeah. Well, because I don't know that it's always the person who is struggling and who is feeling this way may not be capable of verbalizing or even recognizing the routine they've gotten themselves in.
That's very fair.
You know, this is what I do. Okay, but that's not really working. Well, it's not working for you. No, it's actually not working for you. Like,
right. And I think one of the things we need to think about is rather than, well, who in my life should I be paying attention to? Number one, it's yourself first, right? Are you experiencing loneliness and isolation? Do a really serious and searching, as they say in AA, moral inventory, and take a look at, have I been withdrawing? Am I, has my attitude been different? Am I feeling more depressed? Am I snapping at people? Am I more irritable?
I think you could start with these pieces too, and we'll certainly share this, but I think you could start with these 6 pillars. Where do you stand in your social infrastructure within your community? Where do you stand with your connection in terms of public policy? Where do you stand in your mobilization? Where do you, like, if you can't really identify those areas, you need to be aware. It doesn't mean there's a problem. It just means you need to be aware. You take that inventory of how you connect and what your current state is. I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to note is that in the Surgeon General's advisory report that came out, he says approximately half of United States adults report experiencing loneliness, with some of the highest rates among young adults. So if we know that about 50% of people in America are experiencing loneliness,
it's one of us.
It's one of us. That it could be legitimately graphed and charted as part of this epidemic. So assume that if there's 6 people in your family, 3 of them need attention. That's why it's an epidemic.
So to kind of continue, we come back to kind of just this cup of coffee. Let's sit down, have a cup of coffee kind of a thing. I think, we're talking about, I like the way that you put it earlier, Jody, just like we just need to care a little bit more about one another. At what point do you maybe go from, hey, I'm bringing a cup of coffee over to your house, to really trying to make an effort to say, hey, let's get out somewhere. Let's go. One of the things I think of that's an easy one is volunteering, because one, there's probably a good chance it's going to make you feel a little bit better about yourself participating in something that you care about. And 2, from the friend side of it, you're the one that's getting your friend out of the house to do something that they care about. So just, I guess maybe that's the question that I have. Where do you kind of go from just say, hey, I'm stopping over, to a grab your stuff, we're getting out of this house, whether you like it or not, kind of a moment?
I think you need to be careful with that, but I don't know that you're going, I think there's a point, and in order to simply make sure you're safe, you may never reach that point. Like, I think I'm not going to do that necessarily with a colleague, right? If I'm picking up that there's something going on with a colleague, I'm not necessarily going to show up at their house.
I might show up at your house.
I was just going to say, I don't know, the way Amie talked to you earlier, it sounds like she
I know, I feel it.
This
She's offended. My red is provoking her.
And
it is
provoking
me
that
today.
you won't show up to her house if things hit the fan here. So
Yeah, no, I think there are levels of concern. I think there are levels of isolation. I think there are levels of loneliness. I think there are levels within all of that. Certainly in behavioral health, we're talking about an extreme, but in the daily life, it's being present and it's being available. At what point do you drag someone out of the house, thereby committing some sort of crime?
Right. We're not condoning kidnapping at all.
Right.
0.
Right.
But I do think you have to know I think you need to have a relationship, maybe because you're showing up and having coffee every day, or you're showing up and you're dropping something off at the house, or you're intentionally being there for that person, whether they like it or not. This vaguely sounds like a stalking podcast, but I think you're going to get to the point where maybe that person starts to share some elements, and then you can start to together plan things. You also have friends where you could literally go, I'm coming to pick you up. We're going. Let's go.
Right.
And I've done that. People have done that for me. And I think that is individual for sure. Your relationship.
It is. And if you're at a spot where you're like, gosh, I don't know that I could confront somebody like that, or maybe confront's a harsh word, but I don't know that I would feel comfortable kind of invading somebody's personal space like that, then you do have to think about community.
Right.
Is there
Who
a
else
church in
knows
their
them?
life?
Yeah.
Is there, are they involved in any sort of
What's interesting, you might think that person's very disconnected, but in reality, when you're like, gee, I'm really concerned about Amie, she's been really distant. I need to find out, like, who else can I talk to who can talk to her? And then I find out that she's actually working on this huge mission trip and she's focused on that. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I didn't realize you were involved in those kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to empathy in terms of what can really shape our ability to help someone. And we preach this all the time on this podcast, but, getting somebody to their primary care doc for a checkup if they haven't been in a long time and you feel like something's off.
That's huge. And I think is really underrated.
Yeah.
Honestly, we talk about, Crockett, a lot of times you'll be like, oh, we'll talk about therapy, we'll talk about that. But the reality is sometimes you need to have a conversation with your primary care doctor and just say, this is what I'm feeling. This is what's going on. It could be a vitamin D deficiency.
Right.
Let's be real about this. It could be B12,
Right. We really need to have those conversations because now that we're speaking about health, one of the other things in this really amazing advisory packet is that these estimates of multiple other studies indicate that loneliness and isolation are more widespread than many of the other major health issues of our day, including smoking, diabetes, and obesity, and with comparable levels of risk to health and premature death. That's what the surgeon. It's what the Surgeon General is saying. So we need to give it the same medical attention that we're giving to diabetes and to smoking cessation. That's what this report is saying.
Well, hopefully that report speaks to equitable reimbursement for the work that they're doing in figuring that out. That's a whole nother
It's funny,
podcast.
I didn't see that in any of these 80
You
pages.
didn't? You
No.
didn't see that?
No.
Oh, shocking. Okay. Sorry, I digress.
That's a bit of a running theme on this podcast, as a matter of fact. So I think to kind of come back to that point, I think we can see if somebody maybe is a little bit disconnected. But I mean, when you're talking about maybe things that have to do with a person's particular diet, a person's extracurricular activities, do you think maybe there is kind of a shade of gray in what actually defines loneliness for some? Listen, half of adults saying they feel lonely is a shocking number to me. What I guess my question is about a study like that. What actually does define that as lonely? Again, I come back to when you're saying the effects of smoking, the effects of maybe some of the things in your diet. Those things are kind of a little bit more cause and effect to see versus loneliness, where perhaps there's not so much of again, not black or white, a little more of a shade of gray in there. So what kind of, when we say half of U.S. adults feel lonely, what might be lonely to you or might be lonely to Jody might not necessarily is lonely kind of needs to be defined there, just in kind of playing a devil's advocate to that study, comparing to smoking or some of the other things that you might do.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, Crockett. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think when you read, it's just so funny because as Crockett, as you were saying, like, well, what is lonely? Like, what does that mean? I would imagine that they have a definition, or at least that loneliness has a definition that that is consistent throughout the study, right?
You would hope. Now, what they do say is what health workers, healthcare systems, and insurers can do. They do have a page on that in here.
So we don't necessarily define loneliness, to your question, Crockett.
No, I don't have a good definition for loneliness, honestly, and that's
I mean, again, who would? Who can say what you're, again, when there's no physical, tangible thing, again, when you compare it to the other studies that you mentioned on smoking and diabetes and things of that nature, again, all three of us might have a definite, listen, I'm not denying the fact that it is an epidemic, and I'm not denying the fact that you could see in yourself or in someone else that there is a disconnect. But it's exactly to the point that Jody kind of made earlier. I might think that Amie's disconnected and might say something to Jody about it, and then we find out that you're working on a really big project that just has a lot of your time going into it at that moment. So I guess that does kind of lead us to the next question then. So what resources are out there? You were just kind of alluding to that a little bit. What resources are there for people? We mentioned the primary care, and it's so funny that you both mentioned how important that is, because it feels like a common theme coming back to a lot of the conversations we have is kind of, where do you start? It's your primary care doctor. Beyond that, obviously you've got some resources in front of you there, just kind of where we can maybe point someone in a direction or ourselves could go into.
Well, I think first is, and I want to say that I said there was nothing in this report on reimbursement, and I lied about that, because there is. It's on page 56. It just says insurance companies should provide adequate reimbursement for time spent assessing and addressing concerns about social disconnection. So it's addressed in the report. So I would say, number one, if you're passionate about this, go to your congressman, or go to the folks that make and administrate policies in your local government, and talk to them about this, and talk to them about making changes so that there's more of an ability for community health to really help pull people in. I think that's something active that people can do.
That's actually it's funny, because this is your enact pro-connection public policies is one of the pieces. I think if you're an individual experiencing that, or, back to your point, is actually the first step is probably to try to reconnect with things that were comfortable for you in the past. If we're talking about an individual feeling this way, if you are someone who perhaps grew up in church, or you grew up in being involved in certain activities, find little steps that you can reconnect in those ways, I think would be the first thing.